Hey guys, welcome to this very special Blender course. This is a course that I've been thinking about doing for a little while now, and hopefully you will enjoy. It doesn't matter if you're new to the 3D world or if you're already familiar with any of the other 3D softwares. Blender is a really great opportunity for everyone to learn about new tools and new workflows that you might be able to implement in your 3D journey. Now, in this series, I'm going to show you the basics of the interface, basics of modeling, basics of texturing, and even basics of rendering so that you can get the same image that we have in the thumbnail. So what are you waiting for? Let's get started with this Blender tutorial. Hey guys, welcome to this very special chapter, this premium course, this free course for you guys. Today we're going to take a jump into, or we're going to jump into, Blender. Now, if you're watching this video, there's usually two options, or usually two types of students that watch this kind of content. First of all, you are already a 3D artist and you know how to use other softwares such as Maya, ZBrush, maybe 3D Studio Max or Cinema 4D, and you want to learn what that deal is with Blender. Why is it getting so much like news in the last couple of years, and why is it so good, or if it's good at all, right? And of course the answer is yes, it's a really powerful software, and I'm going to be showing you the basics of it. And the other one is you are completely new to the 3D world and you want to learn about all of the things that we normally deal with when creating any sort of production. Maybe you want to get into games, or you want to get into commercials, you want to get into film, and have you heard that Blender is a great starting point and even like finishing point? Like, you can create some amazing stuff with Blender. And yes, Blender is a free 3D software that comes packaged with a lot of very cool features. Now, I am going to be completely honest with you guys. I have been using Maya for the last 10 years, almost 11 years now, and I just recently made the jump into Blender. So I'm going to be showing you a lot of features and things that I have discovered throughout the years in my 3D career and how to adapt those into Blender. Blender is a completely free software. You can donate, of course, and you can just go into the blender.org page, go into the download section, and download Blender 3.2.0, which at the time of this recording is the most recent version. It's available for a lot of different platforms such as Windows, Mac, even Linux, and yeah, you can get it for completely free. Now, one of the things that I want to show that not a lot of people know about is here in the download section, you actually have access to this thing called the demo files, and these are all a lot of different projects that you can either use for your own work or study. You can just open the files and see how people made all of the different things that you're going to find inside of this project. Now, just be very careful whenever you are trying, or if you're going to be using these files for other things. You need to make sure that the license that you have right here is CC0, which is Creative Commons 0, which means that you can use, refurbish, reutilize, whatever. If it has some other like CC, or if it does not have a CC, just make sure which one it has right here, and go into the Creative Commons license information on Google, and it's going to tell you what kind of things you need to do. Sometimes you need to credit the artist, sometimes you need to include it on like a name tag or something. But yeah, like the cool thing about all of these scenes is that you can download them, just open them up in the Blender and see how they were made. So yeah, let's jump into Blender. So as I mentioned, Blender is a 3D package. It's a 3D like development software, DCC, they're called. Maya and all of the softwares are called like that. And this is what you get. Normally when you open Blender, you're going to get a different window, which is going to tell you whether you want to select with right or with left, whether you want to use the Blender shortcuts or any other like industry standard shortcuts. I recommend using the Blender shortcuts because there's a lot of information out there, and most of those informations or most of that information you're going to find uses traditional Blender shortcuts, so it's a good idea to learn them. When you create Blender, this is what you're gonna get, and the first thing you need to get acquainted with is, of course, the movement inside of the interface. So let's take a quick dive of how the interface is organized. First of all, up here we have all of the different menus and all of the different, I like to call them like workstations, or they call it over here workspaces, right? Which is the part of the process that you're going to be working at. Usually in the 3D pipeline, we have different parts of a process, such as modeling, texturing, UVing, shading, animation, rendering, compositing, and all of those things you're going to find right here. You can customize the interface by adding more workspaces. As you can see right here, there's a lot more workspaces that you can add if you want to, or you can just right click and delete workspaces. So if you're not going to be using all of these guys right here, you can change that very easily. Over here, traditional menus such as File, where you're going to find the new, open, close, save, etc., etc. And then this one right here, this is part of like the main buttons that you're gonna see. Depending on what kind of thing you're working on, you're gonna see different things. So for instance, right now, I click this little cube right here, and as you can see, we have this options for the cube. If I click this one right here, some things might change depending on the type of object that you're using. But yeah, so this is the some of the main buttons. We're going to be talking about some of them very, very shortly. And then all of these are the basic tools that we have. But before we jump into the basic tools, I want to talk about the navigation on the 3D world. I like to use this software, by the way. It's called Krita. It's like an alternative to Photoshop for painting, and I really like to for doing annotations. So we know that in the 3D world, we have 3 axes, right? In Blender, you're going to have the x-axis be right and left. The y-axis is going to be front and back. And the z-axis is going to be up and down. This is pretty similar to, for instance, Unreal Engine 4 and Unreal Engine 5. Both of the softwares use this sort of like gizmo setup where Z is pointing up and down. Other softwares such as, for instance, ZBrush, Maya, 3D Studio Max, they change the gizmo around, and instead of having X, Y, and Z like that, what you're going to have is X is left and right, Z is front and back, and Y is top and bottom. Why do they do this? I'm not sure. It's the programmers that create the softwares. They decide which specific orientation to use. But don't worry, it's very easy to just switch from one and the other. Just make sure that you remember that inside of Blender, X, Y, and Z work this way. Now, there's 3 main movements that we're going to have. We have the move, we have what people call the pan, and we have the zoom, okay? So to move inside of Blender, the only thing you need to do is press middle mouse button. Every single mouse usually has like 3 little buttons, right? So you're gonna have like your left click, your right click, and there's usually a scroll wheel in the center. If you're not using a mouse that has a scroll wheel, or if you're trying to use the little trackpad on a laptop, I strongly recommend you go out and buy one cheap mouse that has a little scroll wheel. It's gonna make your life so much easier. Here I'm in Mexico, and here in Mexico you can get one of those for like $5 or something. So super cheap. So yeah, this is the middle mouse button, and as you can see, when we click the middle mouse button, we're going to be orbiting around the scene. Now, if you ever get lost in the scene, don't worry, you have this little thing right here, which is going to tell you where your camera is pointing. So if we do this, you can see that my X is on this side and the Y is on this side. Remember, we mentioned the Y is the front view. So when you go like this, that's us seeing the object from the front, okay? So yeah, that's, and then C is going up and down. Now, if you press a shift and middle mouse button, you're going to be doing this thing, which is panning the camera from left to right and from top to bottom. Very handy to, again, move around the scene. One of the most important things that you need to do when you're learning 3D is how to move inside of the 3D world. And each software has its own way to do it. So unfortunately, it's one of those things that you need to learn for each specific package that you're learning. So shift and middle mouse button, you're going to pan around. And then shift and right click, or not, sorry, just a scroll wheel, it's going to move this thing around. Shift and right click, as you can see right there, I'm moving my 3D cursor. This little thing, it's called the 3D cursor. It's very important for a lot of tools inside of Blender. I'm going to reset it. A very nice shortcut to reset it is Shift S, and then you just go cursor to world origin, and the 3D cursor is going to go back there. We'll talk about the 3D cursor later on. And again, there's a lot of shortcuts, so my advice, by the way, I have this little Karnak thing that is going to show you the keystrokes down here. So when you see the different keystrokes, just follow them along. But try to either memorize them or learn them by heart so that you can utilize this. So Shift S has to do with the little, what's the word? With the 3D cursor. So there we go. Now, as you can see, when we use the scroll wheel, what happens is that you're gonna get this sort of like stepped like zoom. If you wanna go for a more like soft zoom, you can press Shift and or sorry, you can go over here to this little icon, which is the zoom icon, and if you just click and drag, you're gonna get a more like soft zoom on your scene. Very important. So again, if you are having issue with the shortcuts, you are gonna find the exact same things over here. So this is the zoom, this is the pan, and I believe this is the orthographic view. So yeah, just middle mouse to move around, shift, and that's it. So now we can talk about the tools that we have over here, which are called the transform tools, or are the ones that we use to move things around in our scene. Again, by default, we have this cube. If you just click it, you're gonna select it. This cube is set to measure a 1 unit across the axes. So it has 1 X, 1 C, and 1 Y, which inside of Blender, every time you see a unit, it's gonna be in meters. So this is a 1 by 1 by 1 cube meter. So one square, or not squares, one, what's the proper word? 1 cubic volume right here, 1 meter of a cubic volume. So yeah, now inside of any applications, there's 3 things that we can do in the 3D world. We can move the object, we can rotate the object, and we can scale the object. In Blender, the shortcuts are as follow. If you press a G, you're gonna go into the grab option, and it's gonna allow you to move the object around. So if I just press G and move this around, as you can see, the object is now stuck to my mouse, and wherever I drop this guy, it's gonna be its new location. You can see I move 3.8 units on the X-axis, 1.7 units on the Y-axis, and 1.3 units on the Z-axis. So just press G and move and grab this and move it wherever you want. Now, some of you, if you're coming from a traditional package, traditional like 3D package or other 3D packages, we are very used to gizmos, right? Like being able to move the object in the X, Y, and Z very like mathematically, very accurate. So the way to do it here, it's as follows. You're gonna press a G on your keyboard, and then you're gonna press either X, Y, or Z, depending on which axis you want to move your cube at. So if I press C, for instance, I'm going to be constrained to only moving my cube on the C axis. So let's say I need to move this thing 5 meters up. I'll just press G and then C, and I can move this up. Or you can even press a G, C, and then just write 5, and it will automatically go into 5 meters to the top. You can see the up here in the corner, when I press G and C, you're going to see that we're doing that. And I can say, you know what, I want 5.45 units. And it's gonna go exactly to the 545 units that we had from the moment we picked up the cube, okay? So very, very important. At any point, you can just select this object, just hit 0 on the transforms. By the way, the transforms are this little orange box that you see right here for any geometry, for any object that we have. And we're back at the origin. Now, again, some people like using the gizmos. So if you like gizmos, you can go all the way here. So just click this guy right here, and you're gonna get your traditional like arrows, and you're gonna be able to just like click on an arrow and move the cube across. The way to access this, unfortunately, requires an extra keystroke. Some people are used to using like W inside of Maya or 3D Studio Max. In here, you need to press Shift spacebar, and then just click move, or Shift spacebar and click rotate, Shift spacebar and click scale. And that's gonna bring us to the object. So when you're selecting that, that's gonna just change. So Shift spacebar, and then just click either move, rotate, scale, or transform, depending on which one you want. Usually it's move or rotate or scale. If you get used to the shortcuts, it's relatively easy. I jump every now and then, well, not every now, like pretty much every single day I jump between Maya, ZBrush, Substance, Blender, like everything, and with enough practice you get used to all of the shortcuts, so it's easy to follow along. But yeah, at first it can get quite tricky. So a selection, it's this this element right here. We have several types of selections. It's a tweak, it's just the basic one, just select an object and that's it. Selection box allows you to drag and select multiple elements. Selection circle, very simple or similar thing. It's just like a paint selection. And then we have select lasso, which is more like an organic selection. You can like cycle through those with the letter W. So if you go through W, you're gonna cycle through all of those. Usually you're gonna be either in the tweak mode or in like box selection mode. Any of those will work with this kind of objects, and that's it. And yeah, so again, G and X, Y, and Z are gonna move your object around. If you are moving your object around and you want to cancel that movement, you want to go back to where it was, you just press right click, and that's it. And then we have S, which is scale, which is going to allow you to, as the name implies, scale the object in all of its axes. Right now it's an uniform scale. I really like this one. One thing I recommend, if you're going to go for super control scales, move your mouse out of the screen. So when you press S, the line that you get, that dot line, is really, really big, and that gives you a lot more control. Because if you're really close to the 3D cursor, it gets a little bit tricky to get like the exact like effect that you want. But if you go over here, you get a lot more control. So again, depending on the type of like element you want to do, you might want to do, or you might just drag your mouse out of the way of the object. And you can also constrain your scale to a specific axis. So for instance, if I press S and X, I can just constrain this to the X axis. If I press S and Y, I can just constrain or scale on the Y axis. And if I press S and Z, I'm going to be scaling only on the Z axis. And then finally, rotation. If I hit R, we're going to rotate. By default, this is set to free rotation. So it's kind of like grabbing the screen space, and depending on where you're looking at the element, it's going to rotate from that specific point. So it's kind of like rotating from the camera. Very handy when we're in orthographic view, so I'm going to talk about those very shortly. But usually in this place, it's not ideal. So again, same deal, R and then X to rotate on the X axis. R and then Y to rotate on the Y axis, and R and then C to rotate on the Z axis. Those are going to be your shortcuts, and those are the main movement tools that we're going to be using. If you're one of those guys that likes to have the gizmo active at all times and you want to be able to just click on the gizmo, very handy tip over here on this little arrow, you can just select move, rotate, and scale, and that way anytime you select the object, the gizmo is going to be there and all of the gizmos are going to be there, so it's very easy to just like move and scale things around. So again, that's for all of you fellas that are coming from other softwares and you're used to working with gizmos, that's the way to do it. But if not, shortcuts work very nicely. And yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. That's the whole movement. A very nice exercise that I like to give people is to add a couple of primitives into the scene. So how did I delete the cube? There's two ways. You can hit Supreme on your keyboard, or you can press X and just say delete, and that's gonna delete the object. And now, how do we add more objects to the scene? You can go here into Add, Mesh, and select any of these objects, or since we're addicted to shortcuts, the shortcut to add an object is Shift A. Shift A, and you're gonna get all of the different things that you can add. You can go into Mesh, and you can add, for instance, a UV sphere. So I'm gonna add that UV sphere. Let's push it up, and then I'm gonna press Shift A. I'm gonna add another mesh, another UV sphere. Move this up. I'm gonna press S to scale this, right about there. G and C to move it. Let me turn off the gizmos. I've been getting used to working with the shortcuts, so that's it. If you want to duplicate an object, Shift D. So Shift D and then G and C, for instance, to move it up. There we go. Scale this down, and we're making a little bit of a snowman. Now, if you want to be not super exact, you can just press G and move things around, and the snowman's going to be a little bit more, you know, more dynamic, a little bit more natural, not like super perfect. Let's press Shift A again, Mesh. Let's create now a cylinder, for instance. Let's press G, move this up. G, move it towards the center. There we go. And then scale on Z so that we flatten this out. G, move this down. R, just, whoop, maybe R, just slightly tweaking there. S to make it smaller. There we go. G, it's gonna be the border of the hat. And then Shift A again, Mesh. Let's do another cylinder. G, move it up. S, G, and then G again. Very important to rotate the camera to make sure that we're getting this in the exact place that we want. There we go. G again. That's it. Now I'm being a little bit more like not perfect on the positioning of this thing, so that you guys get used to the elements. Normally when we work for 3D, we try to make everything look or behave in a very like specific way, very like calculated, very exact, so we can mirror things around and stuff. But just to have fun here, we're gonna do this. Now, see how everything looks a little bit weird? For instance, the spheres don't look like nice circles. They look like faceted because we see the faces. That's called the shade smooth and shade flat. So you just select the object, right click, and just change this to shade smooth. I'm gonna do this just for the for this guys right here, and there we go. Now Shift A again, let's add another mesh. And one of the cool things is when you add something, like let's say a UV sphere here, you can actually change the inputs. We're gonna talk about this in the next video, but right now we can change the segments and make this like a 12-sided sphere, so it's a lot smaller. Let's G, move it. Let's make it really small. Again, remember what I mentioned? Bring this thing out so that we got more room to scale this out. And then I'm gonna scale on X so we get this like sort of like flat eye. And then G, let's get it right there. G right there. Maybe scale this a little bit bigger. And then we can rotate using the camera so that we get this as close as possible to the curvature. There we go. Shift D and just move it to the other side. Move the camera, rotate. And this is a concept I love talking about, which is, I like to call it complexity out of simplicity. When you're making like really like interesting things, you don't need to make things super complex. As you can see, we're only using the basic shapes and we're already creating something fun. This little snowman here on our scene. Let's say mesh, let's add a cone for instance. Let's scale the cone down and then scale it only on C. And then G. When you rotate, for instance, let's rotate on Y, you can press Control and that's gonna snap the rotation so that you're only going X amount of degrees on a certain rotation. And that's very, very handy as well to create this. Look at that. So yeah, there you go. Make sure to have fun. Add more objects if you want. Try to add some arms, some fingers. Try to add like the buttons here on the front of the character. We're gonna be doing some modeling in the next chapter. But yeah, this is the basics here inside of Blender. So hang on tight, and I'll see you back on the next video. Bye bye. Hey guys, Abraham here. I just want to remind you guys that we upload all of our courses to Skillshare. Skillshare is this amazing site where you can access a ton of different content to learn, improve, and grow as an artist. We have all of our courses available to watch and learn from right now in Skillshare. You can check the description down here, and Skillshare is offering 1 free month trial to their premium membership. With this membership, you're going to be able to access all of our courses and watch and learn all of the amazing things that we cover with all of the softwares. So, what are you waiting for? Check Skillshare down here below. Hey guys, welcome back to the next part of our series. Today we're going to continue with the modeling components, and this is a fundamental part of the 3D world. But before we do that, it's always cool to save some of your first works, especially if this is the first time you're doing 3D. Going back after several years and just looking at what you did at the very beginning of your journey, it's always really comforting. So I'm going to go here into File, and we're just going to save this. Now, one thing I personally don't like as much about Blender is that it doesn't really have a specific like folder structure that you need to follow. Other softwares usually have some sort of like project management thing. There are ways, I'm not saying they're not, but by default there's nothing that you're going to be using. So by default you're going to be saving, as you can see here, in this .blend files, and usually inside of the .blend files you're going to have everything. Sometimes, as you can see right here, we're going to have a folder which is going to hold all of the textures that you're using inside of those files. So for now, as you can see, I'm saving this in a specific folder in my computer, and I'm just going to save this as snowman blend, which is just the basic Blender file element, and I'm gonna save it right here. I recommend having like one folder with your scenes and then one folder inside of that folder with your textures, so that way Blender knows that any texture that you're using inside of the software is gonna be located in that specific folder. So with that out of the way, oh yeah, one thing I forgot to mention, the orthographic views. This guy's right here. Let me see. There we go. So if you press Control and then with middle mouse, you try to go to the different views, right? Sorry, Alt. If you press Alt and you move your middle mouse like this, you're going to be jumping into something called the orthographic views. And the orthographic views are perfectly flat image planes, if you wish, or image sections of your canvas or your viewport, where you're going to be able to see the front, or that's the right actually, that's the left, and that's the back, and that's the front. So this means that my whole character right now, he's actually not facing forward, he's facing to the right, which is not exactly what I want. You guys remember that we talked about this. X is left and right, so right now my little guy is facing the other way around. One very easy way in which we can fix this is we can just like literally go here, remember the W, grab all of the components, and what I'm gonna do here is we can just right click. Actually, let's make it simple. I'm just gonna hit join. Control J will join everything into a single mesh, into a single object. And now if I were to hit R and C, I can just rotate this guy so that he's facing forward, like this. We'll talk about how to split objects and separate faces later on, but for now, everything is a single object, that's fine. We're not doing anything more complicated. Now, some interesting shortcuts that you might want to have. In your number pad, if you have a full keyboard on your number pad, if you press number 1, that's going to bring you to front view. If you press number 3, that's going to bring you to right view. And if you press number 7, that's going to bring you to the top view. Those are the most important ones. We do have the bottom view, which is 9, and I believe 4. Which was it? I don't use this ones as often, but yeah, like 1, 3, 7, and 9 are usually the ones that we're going to be using the most. Just keep that in mind as we go over to the next exercise. So I'm going to go here, File, New, and I'm going to create a general element. I didn't save the last things right there, that's fine. And this is one exercise that I always like doing with any sort of software that I learn. If I'm learning Houdini, if I'm learning like 3D Studio Max, Maya, Blender, any software that has like traditional modeling techniques, I like to do this exercise. And this is due to a little bit of my personal past. When I was just a young 3D artist, one thing that they asked us to model, or one of the first tasks that I got to enter a studio, was to model a D6. It's a relatively simple simple model, but there's a lot of like really cool components that you can learn about this. I'm going to be showing you the exercise that I use now with my students in the next chapter, but this one's is going to allow me to show you one of the most important things about the 3D, which is the components. So in the 3D world, similar to how it works in life, we have like parts that create more complex elements. If you remember your biology class in high school or in elementary school, you know that our body is made out of cells, and then those cells make up tissues, and then those tissues make up organs, and those organs make up systems, and then the systems make up an organism. Well, in a very similar fashion, we have something like that here in the 3D world. I'm going to press tab on my keyboard, and this is going to allow me to go into something called the edit mode. You can find this mode over here as well. So this was object mode, the mode that where we were before, which is where we can move, rotate, scale, and just like place or lay out our element. And then this edit mode allows us to go into the components of the actual object, in this case the cube, and modify them, just change them. Now, what are the components? We have three basic components. The first of them is this one right here, which is the vertex. Okay, so if you click on any vertex point here on your element, you're going to be able to move this around. With what key? Of course, with G. If you grab G, you're going to be able to move this vertex around, and that is the way that we modify and create more complex and more interesting shapes here inside of Blender. Now, if you press number 2 on your keyboard, which is the second option, you're going to jump into the edge mode. If you click on one edge right here, you're going to select the edge, and the edge can be moved. And since we have length, we can actually rotate. Whoop. So rotate, as you can see right there. Rotate, there we go. And we can also scale the edge because we have length. For the vertex, for the initial point that we had right here, we can only move. I cannot rotate. If I press R, you're going to see nothing happens. And if I press S, nothing happens because it's just a point in space. So we don't have any sort of way to modify that point, rather, but just to move it, right? And finally, if you press number 3 on my keyboard, it's just the normal numbers. By the way, it's not on the number pad. It's on your like basic keyboard layout. We're going to go into face mode, which is going to allow us, again, to move the face, scale the face, or rotate the face. Okay, so all of these elements, all of these components are the basics. They're like the building blocks of our 3D world because they allow us to modify them and create interesting shapes that are gonna let us, well, pretty much model anything that we want here inside of Blender, right? So I'm gonna delete this cube, and there's one thing I want to show you about meshes when they get created. So when I create a cube right here, you're gonna see that down here we get this little menu. Now be careful because this menu only appears once the object is generated, and as soon as you finish like the generation part of the process, it goes away. It's a little bit complicated to bring it back, so you want to make sure that you know what you're doing here when we're adding a cube. So as you can see here, we have a couple of options that we can change with the cube, and the basic options is the size of the cube. Right now this is a 2-meter cube, so that would be a huge cube. One cool thing about Blender is you can actually change this to like actual like measurements. So a D6 is about like 2 centimeters, so I can just write down 2 cm, which is 2 centimeters, and as you can see now we're gonna get a really tiny die, but this is gonna be more in line with what we would expect. That's a tongue twister right there. So this matches more closely what we have with a real die. So yeah, this one works pretty well. As you can see, it automatically converts the centimeters to meters, so it's 0.02 meters, but this it works just fine. Now we can change the location where this thing is born, where the little cube appears. Let's press Control-Shift-A again. Mesh cube, there we go, and it remembers the last option that you did. So as you can see right here, the last option that we did for this cube was 0.2 or 2 centimeters. So the next cube we create is going to be 2 centimeters. So that's why it's very important to open this little thing and change the parameters. Now for more complex shapes such as a cylinder, for instance, if we go mesh and we go into the cylinder, you're going to see that the cylinder has a couple of other things. For instance, we have the vertices, which is how many sides we want the cylinder to have. Do we want like a prism, or do we want like an octagon or something? Well, we can change that by using the vertices over here. The radius is of course from the center to the border, and the depth is how thick we want this element to be. So again, a couple of different options. Make sure whenever you create something new, explore a little bit about the options and see which one works better. Now, whenever we're looking at an object that we want to model in 3D, you should always ask yourself the questions: what makes the object itself, right? Like, well, what are the most important characteristics of the object that I want to mimic in the 3D world? And the two main things that I see with this guy are it has beveled edges or round edges, and it has the little dots, right, where all of the numbers live. So let's start with the edges first. we just talked about the components. So I'm going to press tab here on my keyboard, and we're going to jump onto the components of our element. And what this is going to allow me to do is I'm going to be able to select, if I go to number 2, which is edge mode, I can just select all of the edges. Very nice shortcut. If you press A, you're going to select all of the components, in this case all of the edges. So very easily we select everything, and down here or on the left right here, these are all of the tools that we have available to us to modify these components. Some tools work with faces, some tools will work with edges, some tools work with vertices. Like each individual tool has its own specialty, but the one that I'm looking for is this one right here, bevel. As you can see, the shortcut is Control B. I don't like using the shortcut as much because it sometimes behaves a little bit different, so I prefer to go here, and as you can see, we're gonna get this yellow element, and if I click on this yellow element and I push either up or down, you're gonna see that we get this very nice effect where we bevel the edges. So we lose a little bit of the volume, but we round off the edges. And in the same way as what we saw with the cube when we were creating it, every time you use a tool, you're gonna get a little window that is gonna allow you to change some of the parameters for that specific tool. One of those parameters is, for instance, the amount of segments. It looks nice with these beveled edges, but as you can see, we get this, a triangle. And even though a triangle is like the basic shape inside of the 3D world, we don't like to work with triangles as much. They're not bad, but they're like double-edged swords. So when you're starting your 3D career, I recommend trying to avoid triangles as much as possible until you really understand what they're doing, because otherwise you might get some disruptive topology, which is the way that all of the polygons are organized, and that could create some issues later on with like UVs and textures and stuff like that. So just to keep things safe and clean, I'm just going to change the segments to 2. And as you can see, now we have some really nice bevel edges like this. Now you can see that my camera is like going in a really weird way. I'm gonna go back to a tab here, and if we go to view, there's an option here which is frame selected. You can see that the shortcut, it's the number pad and the little dot. So if you hit the dot on the number pad, what's gonna happen is you're gonna frame the object, and now the camera is gonna orbit around the object. If by any reason you miss or you just get lost in the scene and you don't know where things are, don't worry. Just go here to view, and if you go to frame all, you're gonna frame whatever is on the scene. Right now we have 3 things on the scene. We have a camera, a cube, and a light. So that's why we're framing all 3 of them right now. But if I were to select the cube in my outliner over here, or the scene collection, I can just go into view and say frame selected, and there we go. We're just focused on this one element. Now remember the little tool that we used before to round off or to soften these elements right here? Yeah, right click and just shade smooth. And that's gonna give us a very nice round effect for our die. Now, let's go with the next part, which are the little holes. Well, we know that if we want to have a couple of little holes, we probably need more divisions here, right? Like we will need some way to divide this into equal pieces so that we can find exactly what we want. So I really like using this loop cut, and there's this loop cut option. So I'm just gonna click loop cut, and if you click once, you can change this and say, hey, I want 2 divisions right here. Click once and say, I want 2 divisions right there. And then click once and say I want 2 divisions as well. And as you can see now, we have properly and correctly divided our cube into like different segments. Now, this is one of the most basic, again, that's why I like doing this exercise for this like second chapter. We need to understand that the more faces we have, the more edges, the more vertices, the more points we have, the nicer and the more detail we can add to our objects. Nowadays, with technology such as Nanite in Unreal Engine 5, we can have millions and billions of polygons in the screen in real time. Back in the day when I started, optimization was like a really big deal. Nowadays, it really doesn't matter as much, but you of course need to be careful not to use more polygons when you don't really need them. Right now, these divisions that we have right here, this is exactly what we need. So I'm going to show you, before we do all of the numbers, I'm going to show you what we're going to be doing, because it might not seem as intuitive, and it's like a really cool magic trick. So I'm going to go into number 3, which is face mode. I'm going to select this face, and I'm going to press the letter E. And the letter E, what it does is it extrudes a face towards either the front or the back. Extrusion is adding volume using that face's surface. So as you can see, I'm either adding or removing volume using that face as a surface option, right? So if I push this in, as you can see now, there's a hole on the die. It's not actually empty. It's just like a concave section right here. And there's a really cool thing in the 3D world, which is called a subdivision transform. Here inside of Blender, we use something called modifiers. So if you go down here to this little like wrench, I think it's a wrench, this little like tool right here, you're gonna see that we have the option to add a modifier by selecting the object, of course. As you can see, I need to select the object, in this case the cube. And if I add a modifier, I can look for this one called a subdivision surface. And what subdivision surface does is it smooths out the object. So instead of seeing this as a really like hard surfacey thing, like a square hole right there, you're gonna see that once we hit subdivision surface, Now it looks more like a dot. And I can actually increase the subdivisions by one more level. And look at that. It looks really, really, really nice. I'm going to go in a very quick tangent here to explain what this is, because it's a very important concept. This was a mathematical thing that someone named Ed Catmull and his friend, whose name I don't remember, but his last name is Clark. They discovered, these guys were, or are part of the Pixar family, I believe, and they're super, super famous in the 3D world. So the Catmull-Clark subdivision approximation, which is a mathematical model that they devised, goes as follows. Whenever you have 3 vertices and you want to subdivide this option to go from this like very like sharp and right angle element, they're going to find what is the average point between both vertices, and then both vertices, and then the opposite vertices, like this. And then they're going to do some sort of like weird math. I'm not like a pro enough. I didn't study mathematics to tell you exactly what happens. But they find the curvature that would better describe these objects, and they create this soft section like this. Now, the Catmull-Clark subdivision approximation is used everywhere in ZBrush, Maya, Blender, Unreal Engine, everywhere. It's a super, super important mathematical. It's a free source, so everyone can use it. And this mathematical model allows us to soften the object. So you can have a really like jaggedy object, and once you subdivide, you're gonna get a really nice smooth effect, which is exactly what's going on here. So if I press this little button right here, this is it's called the wireframe, and the wireframe will allow us to see how the edges are reacting to the whole thing. So by default, the edges are like this, just like completely square when we don't have any sort of subdivision. You can see the Catmull-Clark subdivision right here. If I go one level up, you can see that we get more polygons, we get more points. You can see a new point appearing right there. And not only that, but we start getting this sort of like smooth effect very nicely on top of the element. So if we go one more, as you can see, let's go back here to the shaded mode, you're gonna see that we start getting that very, very nice effect. Now, here's the kicker. If you were to add a couple of extra loops, we call this support edges. Like imagine, like right now we did the example with 3 little vertices, right? Well, if I were to add 2 more little vertices like right here and right here, what's going to happen is now it's going to do the exact same mathematical approximation, but since now we have more points, what's going to happen with this curvature is instead of going into this very wide open curve, it's going to do this sort of thing where it kind of like crunches this element right here. So those support edges, like this little 2 dots or extra vertices, will make sure that the curvature remains a little bit sharper, okay? So you can see that right now, I mean, this looks good, but it could look a little bit better. What can we do? Well, one of the cool things about modifiers is that they're not permanent. Contrary to other softwares, when you do the transformation, it remains. These are more in this sort of like non-destructive nature. So I'm going to turn this thing, which is the viewport option, off. And we're going to go back to our component mode. And if I were to go with, again, with my loop cut, I can go and add 1 division right here at the border and 1 division right here at the back. So by adding those 2 support edges, 1 at the border and 1 back there, what's going to happen now, if I turn this on, you're going to see that now the whole looks a lot sharper, a lot sharper. Now, if I remove one of those, as you can see, it's going to look a lot better. So I think I'm only going to add the one on the top right there, okay? So that's pretty much what we want to do. That's what we're going to do. We're going to add all of the numbers, and then we're going to use a subdivision modifier to go into this sort of effect. Now, I'm going to go back again into component mode, and I'm just going to start selecting faces. One of the cool things, or one of the important things about 3D, you need to always check your reference. And for those of you that are unaware, a D6, any 6-sided die, will always have the opposite highest and lowest numbers facing each other. So 6 on one side and then 1 on the other side, they add up 7. So that's 5 on one side, 2 on the other side, and 3 on one side, 4 on the other side. That's to make sure it's as even as possible. So if we have 5 over there, it's going to be 2 over there. Let's add the number 6 over here. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 1 down there. We're going to add 4 over here. And 1, 2, 3. There we go. Now, I'm going to do a couple of tricks here. Since I don't want to go and insert an edge loop on every single element, I'm going to use a tool first called Inset. If I press the letter E, what's going to happen is I'm going to be able to inset all of the faces and create a small little loop. And that loop is going to be like the edge loop or the edge support that we did when we first added the support for the number 1. However, if I do this, there's something really ugly that's gonna happen, and that's the fact that the number 6, as you can see, it's not taking each individual like little dot as a separate piece. It's actually getting like all of the faces, and I don't want that. So how do we change that? Every single tool has options. The inset tool, which is this one right here, has this option called individual, which allows me to inset each individual face as a separate piece. And there we go. Now it's just a matter of hitting E again, which is the extrude, but oh my god, we have a big problem. What's going on here? Well, the problem is that the extrude option is it tries to do this thing where it goes towards like the normal of the camera, and if you have multiple faces, it tries to average things out, and that's not what we want. So again, every single tool has options. So if we go over here, we are gonna find the extrude option, and if you click and hold your click for a couple of seconds, you're gonna find this thing called extrude along normals, which is the one that I want to do, which is gonna just push or pull in all of these faces. Now don't pull them in like super high, because you're gonna get some overlap right there. So probably about there. And that's it. Now if we press tab and we go back to the modifiers, we can again add the subdivision surface, and look at this beautiful die. Let's add 2 divisions, and congratulations, my friend, you have created your first like proper 3D piece. And I say proper 3D piece because this geometry that you're seeing right here, it's perfectly like useful or usable for video games, movies, anything. It might not look like a super complex model, and it's not actually, but it's perfectly fine. It has proper topology, it has proper modifiers. We followed every single rule that you would normally do when you're modeling an object, and as you can see, we have recreated a very common object from the world inside of our 3D scene. So yeah, that's pretty much for this one, guys. I'm gonna stop the video right here, and in the next one, we're gonna talk about some more interesting facts about the 3D world. So hang on tight, and I'll see you back on the next video. Bye-bye. Very well, guys. So let's continue with our series right now. And as what we did with the snowman, it's a good idea to save this little guy right here. So I'm just gonna hit save, and I'm gonna call this dice or d6. Let's save it as d6 again. Dot blend. Now, we're gonna jump into a little bit more of a modeling exercise, and this is what I like to call like my like trial of fire. Every single of my students goes through this exercise whenever they're learning 3D, because I think it teaches one of the most basic things about like how to handle stuff. So we're gonna jump into Google real quick, and we're gonna look for a barrel. I love doing the barrel exercise because with this exercise, you guys are gonna be able to understand the principles that make up this sort of things, right? So I think this time around I'm feeling like going for like normally we do like this sort of like realistic looking barrels. I'm not sure. I think we're gonna go for a little bit. Yeah, this one looks a little bit nicer. This is a little bit more like some sort of like game element. So you're gonna save this image. You can save it anywhere. I'm gonna have it on my desktop right now, just to for simplicity's sake. But I do recommend having it on a clean like folder. Usually either the textures folder or some sort of like a source images folder. I'm just gonna create a new scene, general scene, and we're gonna delete the cube. There we go. So what I want to do is I'm going to go to the front view. So I'm going to press number 1, and I want to import that image so that we have the proper positioning of that object inside of Maya. Inside of Maya, oh my god, it's all of the... Sorry guys, it's 10 years of using Maya, just betraying me there. Inside of Blender, we want to bring this image plane inside of Blender so that we can model it properly and try to match the proportions as closely as possible. So you're going to press Shift A, and we're going to insert another mesh. We're going to go down here to image, and we're going to insert a reference image. We're gonna navigate real quick to our desktop right here, and it's this one right here. Just hit load reference image, and there we go. So our reference is right here. The reference image works exactly the same as any object, so we can scale it, rotate it, move it around. I'm just gonna scale it a little bit down because it's a little bit too big. G and C to bring it up. Should be right about there, and there we go. So I know that as long as we follow this one, we should be able to model the object very nicely. Now, here's the deal. We need to understand that sometimes we're going to have to model objects like this one that don't really match a primitive as closely as we would like. It's not a cube, it's not a perfect cylinder either, it's not a sphere, of course. So we're going to have to figure out how to modify the components of our object to properly match this element right here. So I'm going to press number 1. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Control Shift A, or sorry, Shift A. I'm going to go mesh, and we're going to insert a cylinder. We're going to scale this down with S so that we get like the proper like thickness of the cylinder, roughly about there. And let's move it with G and Z. So we have it right here, and then Z and S, we're gonna push it up, and that's it. Let's G and C again to bring this down, and S and C, and we push this up. There we go. So now we've properly matched, or at least as close as possible, the element right here. We can, of course, turn this thing on, which is the wireframe view. By the way, quick shortcut, if you press C, you're going to be able to jump into wireframe and solid, which are the ones that we're jumping across. You can also use 4 and 6 on your, I believe it's the... or sorry, no, you need to press C and then 4, or C and then 6. I prefer just to move the mouse, to be honest. And we're going to talk about the other ones at this thing called rendered and material preview very, very soon, once we go into the rendering section. Because as I mentioned in the intro video, I'm going to teach you at least a little bit of every single thing here inside of Blender so that you guys can get up and going. So as you can see, one of the things that we're missing here is I would like to capture the proper curvature of the barrel, and we don't have that right now. Well, very easily we can jump into components. Let's go into edge mode and let's insert a couple of edge loops. Let's go round one there in the middle. Let's do 1, 2, 3. So as you can see, we have divided the top part of our barrel into these 4 points, which is really, really important. Now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go into number 1 mode, and remember, we're still in this wireframe mode, and I'm gonna go into selection box. I'm gonna grab all of these guys and I'm gonna hit S to scale them down. And as you can see, by scaling them, I'm gonna be able to start capturing the proper curvature of the barrel right there. So by just playing around with these elements right here, I'm gonna be able to scale them down. I probably need to scale this guy up a little bit, and there we go. As you can see, we have now properly matched. We can go here to perspective view. Let's go to solid. We have properly matched this sort of like curvature that we have right here. But of course, we are missing the bottom part, right? Well, what can we do? Well, there's a couple of different things we can do. And I'm going to be using a modifier right now. I'm going to go back to my edit mode, or sorry, object mode. Let's push this guy back. So I'm going to press G and Y to push this back. There we go. And there's a really cool modifier down here on the modifiers. It's called the mirror modifier. So I'm going to turn on the mirror modifier, and what I'm going to be able to do is mirror this object so that we get the top part on the bottom side of the element. However, this thing needs an object, like another object, to use as a point of reference. You can actually use its own object, like you can use the cylinder as the own object, but as you can see, it's not really working. So it's better if we use something else. So I'm going to press Shift A. And there's a really common object that we use, which is called an empty, which is just literally an empty group that has a point in space. And we can use this empty as a point of reference to where we're going to be doing this mirror option. So I'm going to grab this mirror option, or sorry, this guy right here. And on the mirror, I know that I want to mirror on the Y-axis, sorry, on the Z-axis. I want to go from top to bottom using the empty group. Using this empty group right there. There we go. So now as you can see, what's happening is, yes, we're doing the mirror, but we're not following the pivot point of the object. We're actually following the pivot point of the ground right here. There's a couple of ways to fix this. Easiest one would be to just grab your empty group and hit G and C and push this up until you get the proper element. But as you can see, we start getting this sort of like overlap effect. Why is this? Because it's just grabbing like half of the object, and as you can see, it's mirroring on the other side, which is fine, but we don't want to just mirror. We actually want to cut the original object, delete whatever is on the underside of the Z-axis, and paste it or unify it with the new mirror option. That's why we're going to be using this bisect option here on the Z-axis. So now by using the bisect option, if I were to move this up, you're going to see that we no longer get that sort of effect, and we can very easily create the shape of the barrel right there. Now, if you're happy with the mirror and it's working nicely, then the only thing you need to do is hit on this little arrow and hit apply. And that, as you can imagine, will apply the transformation that we did, and it will generate this very, very nice effect. Now, the next thing that I would like to do here is I want to smooth this out a little bit. However, we can't just smooth it. If we try doing this sort of like subdivision surface, you're going to see that on the border here, on the upper border, things are going to look really, really wonky. This is where, again, understanding how the Catmull-Clark subdivision works is really, really useful, because I know that there's only one vertex right here and a lot of vertices in the like vicinity, so it's not gonna work nicely. But you can see that we have this very, very cool effect right there, and that's the kind of stuff that I want to go for. So I'm gonna go into number 3, which is face mode, grab this one, and I'm gonna hit I on my keyboard, which is the inset tool, which, as you can see, it's gonna inset a face, it's gonna create the border, and then I'm gonna press E, which is the extrude, and bring this down to create that sort of depth that we have right there. Let's do the exact same thing over here. So I first to create a little bit of an inset, and then E to push this in. There we go. Press W again to go into selection mode. I'm gonna go into number 2, which is gonna allow me to select the edges, and I want to select all of these edges. Now, a very quick like shortcut to select a whole edge ring, which is all of the edges that are connected like this, is Alt and click. If you press Alt and click, it's gonna select all of the edges that are connected in a single like edge ring. So Alt, and then if you press Alt Shift and click, you're gonna add to that selection. So that way we can select all of these rings right here, and there we go. Let's go very quickly to our bevel option, and let's bevel those edges. So just a little bit of a bevel there. Let's go to the options and add 2 seconds, and there we go. Now, if I were to go back to edit mode, or sorry, object mode, and add a subdivision surface, as you can see, now our barrel is going to look very nice. And we can even right click and say shade smooth, and look at that. We have this very, very nice effect for our barrel. Now, we've only managed to capture the, let's call this the wood section of the barrel, right? We still need to do the rings, and to do the rings we need to do or add another object, which is something that we saw before when we were doing the snowman. You can create a lot of complexity by using a lot of different objects. Now, some of you might be like, hey, couldn't we just like add a couple of edge loops here and extrude the rings out? And the answer is yes. However, especially in film, you usually want to have objects be like objects that are made of different materials. It's better when they're different objects. That makes it a lot easier to shade and texture them later down the road. And also, if at any point we're going to be like removing some of the rings, well, we definitely want them to be separate pieces, right? So, easiest way, let's go to number 1, which is our front view. I'm going to press Shift A, and we're going to add, in this case, a mesh. I'm going to add a cylinder again. Now, of course, I'm going to press GC. Let's move the cylinder up. Let's go into face mode. Select the bottom and up face. I'm going to press X to delete those faces. So now we have this ring. And we're going to scale on Z to get this very thin element, and then scale uniformly. G and C, bring this down. Let's go back to front view. And now it's going to be a lot easier to find like the perfect measurement for this thing. So G and C, bring this up. S and C, just scale this down a little bit. There we go. And that's it. Now, of course, if we try to scale this, the problem we're going to have is that the curvature of the ring does not match the curvature of the barrel itself. So we need to go into component mode, probably go into vertex mode, grab all of this upper vertices and hit S to scale this in and match the proper curvature right about there. There we go. Now we press again C and go into solid mode. We're going to be able to see this. And I'm actually going to scale this in, and I'm going to show you why in just a second. Because I'm going to show you now another modifier, which I love. I love this modifier. It's one of the most amazing things ever. I hope this thing existed in other softwares because it's just so great, which is the solidify modifier. And what solidify does is it pretty much adds volume to the whole thing. Here's another shortcut in your number pad. If you use the slash key, you're going to isolate the object that you're selecting. So as you can see right here, I can create and add this thickness to the object, and I can just like create this amazing thing. The offset is the direction in which this thing is going to be going. I'm going to change this to +1 so that it goes out. And now if we press slash again, you can see that this ring is actually going out, and we're creating this amazing looking ring going around the object. Now, of course, I'm going to have to hit apply on this thing so that this is now like proper geometry. And if we were to add a subdivision modifier, it's going to look horrible. It's going to look very soft, very not nice. But we can go very easily to our edge mode. Select the edge loops on the inner and the outer side of the element, and we can hit bevel again. So we hit bevel, and we can bevel them. It seems like I added one more. Let me just check real quick. If you want to check if you have like double transformations or something, actually let me delete this modifier. There we go. Like if you press G and you move things around, you shouldn't be seeing any like weird movement. It should only be one element. So again, number 2, Alt, click, click. Let's start with those. Let's do a bevel. Okay, it's a very soft bevel. We can change the form of the bevel with this guy right here and with the width. Just be very careful. I mean, the most important thing about the bevel is that we get the divisions. Because by adding those extra edge loops, that's gonna keep things sharp. So just be very careful not to overlap them really like heavily. And then this guy and this guy. Let's do another bevel. There we go. Let's do 2 segments, and that's it. So now if we add the subdivision modifier, as you can see right here, that's going to look a lot better. We can right click and shade smooth. And our barrel is going to be looking quite nice. It seems like we do have a little bit of a double transform right there. It's a little bit weird. That's fine. Okay, so I'm just going to apply this transformation. There we go. Okay, yeah, that kind of got rid of it. Kind of looks like we have, yeah, as you can see, we have like a lot of different edge loops right there. It's a little bit weird, but that's fine. Oh, I moved the pivot one. Shift S and then cursor toward origin, very important. And let's hit slash. There we go. So now if we go to number 1, I'm gonna realize that my element, it's a little bit too thin. It became a little bit too thin. So let's go to object mode. And we're gonna scale this on C to make it a little bit fatter while still keeping the curvature. And now, again, we don't want to do more work than what we need to. So I'm gonna press G and C to move this up. And then C, or just S to scale this down a little bit. Maybe a little bit more. There we go. And now the only thing I need to do is I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate this, and then G and C to move this down, right about there. S to scale it up until we hit the proper curvature. And there we go. Press C and solid, and we have the upper and lower rings on the top part of the barrel. Now, again, one thing we can do is just right click, join them so they're a single element. Remember this guy that we had right here? It's still there. The empty group that we're using as our mirror point, it's still there. So we can grab this guys and say, hey, you know what? I want a mirror on the C-axis. Now we don't need to bisect because it's going to be like further apart. And we're going to use, again, the empty group to mirror across that point. So that way we don't need to like position them. It's automatically going to do that. And if we want to keep this permanently, we can just hit apply. And there we go. Our barrel is completely ready. So yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. This is what we would normally do. Now, the only thing that we're missing is just cleaning up these things a little bit. So let's delete that group. Let's delete that image. And we have this very basic barrel that's ready to go into the next section, which is going to be textures. I'm going to be showing you how to do a texture for this guy so that we can use some materials and start seeing some of the elements that we would normally see for a shape like this one. So yeah, hang on tight, and I'll see you back on the next one, guys. Bye-bye. Hey guys, welcome to the next part of our series. Today we're going to be talking about something that's really tricky. A lot of people hate this sort of stuff, but it's super important because inside of the 3D world, we need to do something called UVs. And UVs are a way in which we can create a map, a two-dimensional representation of our 3D map that we have right here, a 3D object. And yeah, that's pretty much what we're going to be doing. So I'm not going to go like super in depth about what they are or how they I'm going to show you how they work, but they get really complex once we go into more elaborated meshes. For this particular one, we're going to keep it really simple. And the way we're going to be seeing the UVs is by going into this UV editing mode that we have right here. And as you can see right now, well, on this side, let's grab this, guys. Press again the little slash icon. These are two screens that we can work with. This is going to be my UV screen right here, and this is going to be the elements. Now, to create UVs, what we're going to do is we're going to go into edit mode, actually. We're going to go into the edit mode section, and we can literally select all of the faces. And as you can see, these guys actually already have a little bit of a UV. I'm going to press Z and go into wireframe so we can select everything. And you can see that most of these rings already have UVs present. However, these UVs are not working as intended. They're not actually like doing exactly what I would like them to do. I would like to see these elements as like little strips of faces that capture the effects of our what's the word? Of our metal rings, right? So the good thing is that they actually already have the cuts ready. The only thing is that they're not properly laid out or anything. So what we can do is we can go into UV section right here, and we can hit this option called unwrap. And by hitting the unwrap option, actually we need to go into vertex mode. There we go. So UV, and we hit unwrap. And it should be unwrapping. The problem is we forgot to do something really important with this object, and that is we forgot to freeze these transformations. If you are coming from a different 3D package, this might be something that you've done before, but usually when you modify an object, when you scale it, rotate it, or change anything, it remembers its original position, its original scale, and that something can mess up things like this, like UVs. So it's very important that once we're happy with how our models are looking, we apply those transformations. And for this one, I believe the shortcut is I always forget about this one. You can also go in here into, we're going to go into mesh, and we're going to go into object, apply, control A. That's it. Control A, and it's going to be, and we're going to apply all transforms. So now all of the locations, rotations, and scales of this object, as you can see, are back to zeros and ones. Now we can select everything, and if we were to go here to UV and unwrap, what should happen right here... Oh, we don't have edge seams. Okay, yeah, we're gonna have to paint the edge. I thought we already had them, but we don't. Okay, no problem. So we're gonna go into let's go into shaded or solid mode, and what I'm gonna do is we're gonna go into edit mode, of course, and we're gonna select where we want this cuts to go. So UVs, again, they're like a map. The easiest way for me to show you what the UV is with like a kinder surprise. Like this is the basic example I always use when teaching UVs. And this guy's right here, when you're designing the sticker or the little like wrapping, you don't design it on a 3D shape, you design it on a flat surface that once it goes on top of the object, you're gonna get the perfect element, right? Well, that's exactly what we're going for. We wanna find where or how we would need to cut these 3D shapes so that we can flatten them out into like wraps that we can then later on texture on top of. So the easiest one for this one is to go, let's go into edge mode. And we're going to select the edge rings that go in the inside of the objects. It's very important that we go on the inside because that's the part that's going to be hidden. And then, since these are rings, we also want to cut one that goes across like this. I'm just pressing Shift and Alt to select the full edge ring like this. There we go. And we're going to go to UV and we're going to say Mark Seam. And what that will do is now this will tell Blender, let's say, hey, I want you to unwrap this elements. I want you to unwrap this whole effects that we have right here. Let's select the whole thing in wireframe mode. And I want you to use those seams that I just marked so that those are the points where we're going to be doing all of this like unwrapping from. So we're going to hit UV and unwrap. And as you can see, now we do get these very, very nice clean edges that go all the way around. And when we map a texture on top of this, things are going to be just working amazingly fine. So there we go. Let's bring the barrel now. So I'm going to go back to object mode. Let's select the barrel. And we need to do the exact same thing. So I'm going to jump into edit mode. We're going to go into edge mode, which is number 2. And we're going to select that edge ring right there. That edge ring right there. And then one edge ring that goes along the surface like this. And we're going to say UV, mark seam, and then grab everything and say UV, unwrap. And as you can see, we get this. Sometimes you're not going to get the best unwraps like this one that you see right here. I mean, it's okay, but it's not the best one. There are tools out there that are going to allow you to get some like way better UVs. For now, since I want to keep this simple, we're going to keep it just like this. And this is going to allow us to have this very nice effect. Now, the problem is that we have two sets of objects, right? We have the rings, which, by the way, let's rename this. Let's call this rings. I always mess up my capital letter, and this is going to be barrel. So if I grab both of these elements and we go into the UVs by going into edit mode, selecting everything. Actually, let's just join both of them together. So I'm going to grab this guy, right click and say join. So they're a single object. Even though they're separate meshes, they're a single object right now. And now we can go into the UVs, and if we select the UVs, you're going to see that they're right here. So what we need to do is we need to select all of the lines right here, the rings, and we need to move them around, because one of the rules that we want to do with UVs is we don't want them to be all in the same place. There's also another option, I believe here, which is going to allow us to light map pack. Is that the one? Nope, that's not the one. We can try another unwrap right here. There we go. And by doing another unwrap, by selecting everything when everything is a single object, we're now able to pack them in a single element. And this should work fine. It might not be the best UV, but you get the idea. And hopefully now that we're going to jump into the textures, it's going to be a little bit easier to understand. Now we definitely need to add a subdivision modifier to this. So let's add one subdivision modifier. There we go. So now things look nice inside this element. And now we can talk about the textures, right? Because that's the main thing that I wanna talk about. So let's very quickly go into the internet and look for like a wood texture. Okay. So if we were to grab like any of these textures, like this one right here, I can just download and save this one. You're usually gonna save it on the what's the word, on the one that I talked about, the folder that we created. I have this one right here, Blender Basics and Scenes, here, textures. So I'm gonna save this as a wood texture. and we're gonna assign this texture to something called a material. I'm gonna be talking more about materials in the next video, but I just want to show you real quick how to get this so that you can see how the UVs work. I'm actually gonna be texturing this barrel inside of Substance Painter off camera just to get some nice textures for you guys so that you can use it on this exercise. But yeah, that's definitely another thing that we will need to talk and cover in any other times. I also have a very cool course. It's a Mattress Mask texturing course. It's also free for you guys, so check it out if you want to learn a little bit more about Substance Painter. So here what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go into this little red dot over here, which is the material slot. And on the material slot, I can create a new material. I'm gonna call this new material M_barrel. I like to use the M to indicate that this is going to be the material assigned to the barrel. I like to do this because every now and then in a scene, you're going to have a lot of objects that share the same name. So you're going to have like the geo, textures, lights, cameras, like specific to one object. And it can get like a little bit messy. So by adding these suffixes, it's a little bit easier for you to know what you're talking about. Now on the base color, I'm going to click this little button right here and I'm going to assign an image texture. And if I hit open, I'm going to be able to go into the elements that we have right here. Let me see if I have the other one open. Nope. Okay, let me navigate real quick. So projects 2022. Over here, here, oh, here, here, and then scenes. You know, it's a lot of folders, but I like to keep my stuff organized. And there we go, hit open image. And now we have assigned the texture that we downloaded to the color of this object, but we're not seeing anything. Why? Because we need to jump into this other mode, which is called the viewport shading mode. And the viewport shading mode, as you can see, will allow us to see the texture being projected on top of the barrel. Now, yes, this texture looks completely horrible right now. It's a super, super ugly texture, but it gets my point across, being that now we have this UV that is projecting an image in a very nice way, at least we're saying like the details and everything, on top of our object. Of course, the whole texturing process is another topic that we're going to have to cover in a different time, especially when using like PBR textures and stuff. Right now, it's just going to give you a very, very quick overview of how UVs work. And as you saw right here, our UVs are working very, very nicely. We have this texture now, and the UVs are being mapped around that texture. So that's why here on the layout, we're seeing this element right here. Now, don't think I'm going to let you right here. In the next video, I'm going to talk about the materials, this little thing that we just saw here, and I'm going to show you how to plug in proper textures to get this barrel looking amazing. You're going to be able to get the render that you saw on the thumbnail. So yeah, hang on tight, and I'll see you back on the next one. Hey guys, welcome back to the next part of our series. Today we're going to continue with the next section, which is textures. We're going to be texturing this barrel and we're going to be getting it ready for the final part, which is going to be our render. So as you can see, this is Substance Painter. This is another software that we use, and even though we do have some texturing tools inside of Blender, it's not nowhere near close what you can achieve with other softwares like this one, which is Substance Painter. So as you can see, this is a very basic barrel, just like a 5-minute texture that I throw in, and I've already exported these textures. You're going to find them on your folder, which is going to be this barrel roughness, normal, metallic, height, and base color. We're actually not going to use height this time. We're just going to be focusing on this 4, which is base color, metallic, normal, and roughness. So I'm going to drag this to the side, and we're going to jump into Blender. There we go. And what we're going to do is we're now going to jump into a different section, a different part, a different area of Blender, which is the shading section. And shading is really, really cool because it's in a section where we're going to be able to assemble our materials. So as you can see, since I have this barrel selected, let's select it. There we go. Since we have the barrel selected, we're going to be able to check what's happening with the barrel material. And as you can see right now, this barrel has this base color connected to the original wood texture that we created. We're going to replace this. Easiest way, just open this thing, go right here and look for this barrel base color. Hit open image. And look at this. Now, since this texture is actually calibrated to perfectly work with our element, we're getting this amazing looking effect. However, this doesn't look like a realistic barrel, and the reason is, even though we are using the proper texture, we're not connecting, or we're still missing the connection of some of the other elements. One of the most important elements is going to be the metallic element. So you can just drag and drop the image right here, and it's going to create a new file node, or you can press Shift A and look for a, I believe it's called the texture node. There we go, image texture. And it's going to get this node. So let's open this one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go for this metallic element. Hit open image. Well, since I dragged this, it should automatically be linked there. And the only thing we need to do is we need to connect this metallic element to this section right here that says metallic. So I'm just going to drag this color and get it into metallic. And now what's going to happen is the metallic parts of the object should start behaving more like metal, and the other parts should remain looking like wood. However, there's one problem, and this is a little bit more advanced, so I'm just going to gloss over it, just going to tell you what to press exactly to make sure this works. But this metallic image right now is being linearized, or not linearized, it's being color managed by changing the way the colors work into this standard sRGB. We don't want that, so I'm just going to hit this one right here, and I'm going to say raw. That's going to make sure that this behaves exactly like I want it to behave, which is the way it behaved inside of Substance Painter. And there we go. So that's the only thing you need to do. Just make sure that for the metallic and for this other one, which is the roughness, the next one, for these two images, you are going to go into the color space and you're going to change this to raw, so that we are not using any sort of like color information and we're just only using the values. Now this roughness, as you can imagine, is going to go into the roughness. Very easy. If you played this little game when you were a kid where you had to place the square on the square and the triangle in the triangle place, it's pretty much the same thing, as you can see. And now the element's looking even better. Look at that. Now the metal's actually shining like metal. The metallic texture will tell us which part of an object is metal and which parts are not metal. And the roughness texture will tell us how each section of the element reflects light. The more roughness that you have, the less light you're going to be reflecting. Okay? So yeah, there we go. So we have 3 of this, guys. We're just missing one more, and that's the normal map. So I'm gonna drag and drop the normal map right here. But even though it might seem like we can just connect this normal color to this one right here, we actually need an intermediate node to properly calibrate this material. And that's gonna be Shift A, and on the search area, we're gonna write normal. And if we look for this normal map, we're gonna get this little node. Very important to use this one. So the color goes into the color, and then normal goes into the normal. And now what's going to happen, this is amazing, we're going to get some detail. It's going to look like this barrel has more detail than it actually has. We know that this barrel is supposed to be like a flat element, right? Like completely smooth. But now look at all of those like nickels or like nicks and scratches that it has. Very, very cool, right? There's one little problem though, and that's the fact that this one also has to be changed from sRGB to raw. We don't want any color manage. We're just going to use it as is. And there we go. Look at all of those little details that we have now on our barrel. So yeah, that's pretty much it. There's one more thing I don't like about this one. And as you can see, the normal map is actually inverted, which is it's a little bit like wrong for what we want. So we're going to do something. So again, it's a little bit of a I'm not sure how to say this. A little bit of those technical things that it might take me a little bit longer to explain. But since I want you guys to get you ready to use Blender in the fastest time, I'm just gonna tell you exactly what to do and just go over the basics. So normal maps come into 2 different types of normal maps. We have normal or OpenGL and DirectX. They're like graphic processing things that you have inside of softwares. This one or Blender uses OpenGL, and it seems like this one right here got exported as a DirectX normal map. So we need to flip the Y channel. Usually there are some what's the word? There are some softwares that have a little bit of an option right here to just change or flip an element, but in this case we're gonna have to do it manually. So there's a couple of ways to do this. One of the easiest ones I would say, and it's a little bit more visual. I'm just gonna press Shift A, and I'm gonna look for something called an RGB curves right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to inject this before the image. So this only allows us to access the curves of the elements that we have right here, the curves of our channels. And what I can do is I can go to the green channel and just like literally move this thing up and move this thing down. That's the only thing that you're gonna need to do. And as you can see now, the normal map, it looks like it's actually going in the direction that it's supposed to be going. So this looks like things that are going towards or to the inside of the element. It's super silly, it's super like weird, and of course if you don't have someone to tell you to do this, it might be a little bit difficult to find, but that's why again I'm giving you the textures and I'm giving you all of this like setup so that you can very quickly create these elements. Now let's very quickly go to the layout and look at this. Our barrel is looking amazing. Even the cab right here looks really, really cool. So before we move on to the final part of this Super Express Blender course, let's do a quick setup here for our barrel. So I'm gonna press. Hey guys, welcome back to the next part of our series. I apologize, the video cut off at the very last part of the recording and I was unable to save that part of the session. And I just duplicated the barrel a couple times, changed some of the skills, and moved around to create this very nice composition. Because now we're going to be talking about rendering. We're going to be rendering this element, and we're going to be able to get a very nice image for our first steps in this 3D journey inside of Blender. So the first thing I want to create is I want to create something called call a infinite background, or I like to call it an infinite background. It's a very, very useful thing that we can use to create a backdrop for our elements so that it looks a little bit nicer. So Shift A, create a plane. We're gonna jump into component editor, grab this edge, hit E to extrude, Z to bring it up, and there we go. Grab that edge right there, and with the bevel tool selected, we're just gonna bevel that thing and add several segments, just like that. That's pretty much it. Right click and shade smooth, and there we go. We have our backdrop for our element. Now, how are we gonna frame our render? Well, that's gonna depend on the camera that we're using. And every time you start a new Blender scene, you're gonna find this camera that's ready to go. So I'm gonna click this button right here, and as you can see right now, I already have my frame selected. But you're probably gonna see it something like this, which looks very, very ugly. Now, to properly or easily move the camera, I like to use the following shortcut. You're gonna select the camera, press N, and go into this view option right here. And once on the view option, you're gonna select this option called camera to view. That means that when you're inside the camera, wherever you moved your view, the camera is gonna follow. Otherwise, it becomes a little bit difficult because you have to manually move the camera as an object, and it's just I personally don't like it. So with this option selected, it's very easy to just find the perfect frame for our scene. So something like this, I think, looks really, really good. Now we're going to talk about let's get out of the camera right here, and we're going to talk about the rendering engines that we have here inside of Blender. If you click this last little sphere right here, which is the shading option, we're going to jump onto the rendering options, and the renderings happen right here on this camera thing. There's two rendering engines, If and Cycles. Workbench, it's other thing. That really doesn't work right now. So we're gonna use If whenever we want to do real-time rendering. We don't want to wait for the renders, and we just want it to be really, really fast and really, really efficient. This is kind of like rendering inside of a game engine like Unreal or Unity. So if you're going for this sort of machinima, I think they're called, or that sort of stuff, you can get some really, really pretty renders using just If. However, if you want to go for the pro version of things, we're gonna go into Cycles, and Cycles is the actual ray trace render that we can use to create our images. Now, if you have a compatible GPU, you can use this GPU compute option by going right here. There's another preference that you might want to check. Right here in Edit, you can go into Preferences, and if you go into the rendering section, which is... oh, where is it? That's weird. It's usually there. Edit. Yeah, it should be in Preferences. System, there we go. So if you go into system and you have a GTX, like an NVIDIA GeForce thing, you can actually turn on this thing, CUDA cores, to use your CUDA cores, and that usually gives you some nice options. You can also use optics, or some of the other ones. I recommend, if you're using GeForce, CUDA is really good. I've heard people use optics and it works really good as well. It's a little bit more open source, so it looks really nice. But I like using CUDA. And yeah, just make sure that your GPU is selected so that it's actually using all of the power inside of your component to get the renders very, very fast. Now, rendering is all about three things: good materials, which we already have, a good framing, which we already have, and good lights. That's like the final piece of the puzzle to get a really, really nice effect on your render. So I'm going to show you something. It's one of those very, very cool things, which is called an HDRI, High Dynamic Range Image. And this site right here, Polyhaven, is probably one of the best places to get HDRIs. They're completely free for you to use, any of these ones for commercial use even, and they're really, really, really good. These are images that have a lot of lighting information inside of them, and it allows you to project that light information into your scene so that it looks like your object is inside any of this environments that you see right here. I've actually downloaded one for you guys. It's called the Back Studio something. And I'm going to show you how to plug it in. So it's very, very simple. You're going to go to this option right here, this world option. By default, this is one. And you're going to click this little yellow dot, and you're going to look for an environment texture. Click that one. And once you have this, you just open, and if you go into the texture folders, I got that one for you. It's called Brown Photo Studio. Hit open image, and there we go. It's almost like magic, guys. I love using HDRs. They're really, really good, but they're, again, like double-edged swords. So even though they're really, really good, there's more things that we can do to make our renders even better. But just look at this. This looks really, really nice, really, really clean, kind of like an architectural visualization kind of things, right? Really, really soft, the light, which is, it's just amazing. So if we go to the camera, this is what the camera is seeing right now, and we can just hit a render and hit render image, and this is the actual render that we're gonna get at the end of the process. So this is already full HD, and of course the more time that it passes, the cleaner it's gonna look. And as you can see, this looks really cool, right? So I'm gonna stop the render right there. Let's go back over here, and let's play around a little bit with lights, because I would like to create a little bit more of a cinematic light or a cinematic look to this thing. So the first thing I'm going to do is I want to lower the intensity of this image that we have right here, and you can do this by going here into the strength. So let's bring this down to something like 0.1, like really low. I do want to have like this sort of like bounce line going around, but I don't want this light to be the main like actor of the whole scene. Now I'm going to go and press Shift A, and I'm going to add a new light. And this is going to be a point light. And I'm going to press G and just move this point light around. And as you can see, as any other object in a scene, a point light will shine, in this case, light into our scene. And we can position this wherever we want. And as with any object inside of Blender, we can change its properties. So for instance, let's increase the intensity. Let's go to like 100. Or even like a little bit higher, like 200. There we go. And let's change the color. What if we go for this sort of like warm red effect, like something like this? Not bad, right? Not bad. This is looking a little bit better, a little bit more professional. And again, at any point I can just move this light around, play with the shape of the lights, or where I want this position to be. I think that looks interesting. I kind of want to push this forward a little bit to get some nice shadows back there. Let's move it over there and maybe lower the intensity a little bit. Let's go with 150, so it's not like super intense. And look how nice this composition looks now. Right now I do have this option called the viewport like rendering, so I am rendering while working on the viewport. If you have a strong enough GPU, you can do this. If this is a little bit too much, don't worry, just lower the samples here on the viewport rendering to something like 32 or something. It's gonna look really noisy. You're not gonna see as much detail, but it's gonna look, or it's gonna work a little bit faster. And yeah, let's add one more light here. So Shift A, and I'm gonna say light. And now let's add a spotlight. Spotlights are really cool because you can actually point them to specific places. So I'm gonna bring this up like there, and let's rotate this so that it's facing towards the barrels, like there. There we go. And of course, let's increase the power on this one. So let's go to the lights. Let's again see something like 200. There we go. And this one I'm gonna go for like a nice, cool looking blue. Maybe even a little bit more, like 500. There we go. Now if we take a look at the viewport, look at that. That looks pretty nice. We can increase the radius, for instance, on the spotlight. So we cover a little bit more area. And if you need to go crazy on the power, just go crazy. As long as you get a nice composition, that's the main goal. That's the main idea. So 200 looks maybe a little bit too much. Let's go with 1,000. And there we go. We can at any point change the framing. Maybe get a little bit closer. Play around with this one. I really like this composition right here. And there you go. We have our render almost ready. The only last thing we need to do is we need to go to this camera right here, and we need to change the time limit. I like to change my time limit to 1 minute so that it only takes 1 minute to render, and it's going to do its best to render the cleanest image. Of course, if you have a stronger computer, 1 minute, or you might need a couple more minutes, just change this until you get a good result. But one of the amazing things about the newest Blender editions, and pretty much all of the 3D softwares nowadays, they come with pre-integrated denoisers, which will clean all of this noise that you see right now on the viewport. That's going to be cleaned on the final render. So let's give it a shot. I'm going to say render and render image. And you're going to see it's literally like magic. Once it starts rendering, there's going to be a moment where poof, the denoiser is going to kick in and all of this noise is going to be gone. Look at this part right here. And in just a matter of seconds, all of these guys are going to be gone. Like right now, I can still see a little bit of that noise. Like pay attention right there. You can see how the time is moving here. So each second that passes, the computer is analyzing every single pixel on the scene and is trying to find the best possible color for that pixel, the most exact color. And once the time is done, once we hit 1 minute, what's going to happen is that the render is going to finish and the denoiser is going to kick in. And all of this like little noise that you see there, which is barely perceptible to be honest, but all of this noise is going to be gone. Let me really show you here, because I mean, this is just, it's just amazing. It's a great technology. We're only like a couple of seconds away. Let's just wait a little bit more. And again, as I mentioned, as soon as the render is finished, what we're going to see is all of this noise on the background. It's going to be completely gone, completely deleted. 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1, and render is done. There you go. Look at that smooth gradient. My God, that looks amazing. That, my friends, is the magic of the technology of 3D. And look at this beautiful render. If you made it all the way to this point, then congratulations, my friends. You just created an amazing piece of 3D artwork that showed you all of the necessary steps that you need to know to get into this 3D industry. You now know the very basic things about modeling, the very basic things about UV, a little bit about materials, rendering, a little bit of everything. Now, as you guys know, the more time you invest into something, the more you learn about something, the easier it's gonna be to get into the position or to the goal that you might have on your own 3D career. So yeah, this is it for now, guys. It's been an honor for me to be your instructor throughout this course. Hopefully you like it. Please leave us any comments, share, subscribe, anything that you can do. And make sure to check out all of the other courses that we have to offer. This is Abraham Leo, and I'm signing out. I'll see you back, guys, in the next course. Bye bye.